Miguel Myers. Welcome to My Horror Confessional, where every week I'll have a guest come on and talk about one classic horror movie that they haven't seen and why. We'll discuss the movie, the actors, and probably get off topic quite a bit. Once I believe they are properly atoned, I will absolve them of their horror movie sin. Today in the confessional, we have Sarah Wambold. Sarah is a writer and funeral director in Austin, Texas. She is the co-owner of Campo de Estrellas Conservation Cemetery in Bastrop County. Her writing and expertise on natural burial has appeared in the Texas Observer, the BBC, the Order of the Good Death, and elsewhere. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Miguel.
Yeah, I'm really excited. See, this is a bit weird because I know Sarah in real life. We have friends and we have mutual friends and all that. So we were actually at a was it Zach's? I forget which party we were at, and we got started talking about like horror music, like hip hop,
Horrorcore.
yeah, horrorcore, yeah, and that was a lot of fun. It was fun to find somebody else who kind of dug that, and I got to talking a little bit more, and I found out that you were actually into horror movies. And then you told me that you were like a funeral director and all this other stuff. I was like, yeah, this is perfect. I'm scheduling for October. Like this is going to drop this Friday, so very close to Halloween, spooky season. All that's the time we're talking about death and all this sort of stuff. So I thought, what more perfect time to have you on than here? And here you are. So I'm really excited. I'm really thankful that you're here. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, this is the time of year where the funeral directors are in high demand for content.
Yeah,
I have to say.
I hadn't even thought. I hadn't even thought of it. It didn't occur to me, but apparently so.
Yeah.
So you are a funeral director. So is that something that you started off like knowing that you wanted to do, or is that something that you kind of found your way into later?
No, I can say pretty confidently that I always wanted to be a funeral director. It's part of my story. I would say at this point that as a child, I was told by my mom that I should go into funeral service. I think I was like 12, maybe 11, maybe younger. I don't know.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
I know.
What prompted that from your mom?
I think just like I grew up in a family and in a community where when people died, we all just went to the funerals. Like there was no real shielding people from the experience, and happened to be like at funerals for people in my family or for friends. And I don't know, I think I had a real calm disposition around the situation, and I was extremely curious about it. I asked a lot of questions. It was kind of I guess this is like speaks to my goth roots, which I never really acknowledged until like someone told it to me as an adult, but I was just really obsessed with that. I don't know, not really. I never felt like it was a creepy way. I just was curious about what the whole process was. And so she was like, I think you should look into that as a career. And as a teenager, I worked in a nursing home for several years through college. And that's where you get a lot of exposure to like end of life process and just death in general. So felt like the natural next step after I got out of college was to like go back and get my license as a film director. And it was, it's been an interesting ride. It's a very strange industry and it's a strange career.
Yeah. So what sort of education is required? I know you said a license. So what's sort of the process for that?
It really depends on the state you're in. I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Okay. Great horror city.
Yeah.
And I went to community college for 2 years, a 2-year program. And at the same time, you are required to get like an apprenticeship. So I think it was maybe 2 years of apprenticeship at the same time that you're in school. So you get like like an associate's degree in mortuary science, and then fulfill like a certain number of hours of apprenticeship, and then sit for a state exam. And I have a dual license where I can embalm and I can arrange for funerals for people. So I am dual licensed, and you don't have to do both, but I decided to do both.
Yeah. So as a funeral director and somebody who embalms and has like been in the industry, how do you feel like the role of funeral directors is portrayed in like horror movies? Like, do you think it's pretty accurate, or is it or you know, like for example, my
Yeah.
wife's husband. No, I'm sorry, I'm my wife's husband. My wife's
Yeah.
father is a doctor, and
Uh-huh.
he's always griping about the fact that like if you knock somebody in the head with a gun, it's not going to knock them out, right?
Oh, it's not?
No,
Sure.
it's not, yeah, like any little things like that, or like if
Yeah.
you get shot, and then you know what he just says, like things are inaccurate and not represented correctly. So I was just wondering for you if you found that.
Oh no, that's true. I mean, obviously they're super camped up, I think, in a lot of instances, but some of them get it really right. It's not horror, but honestly, 6 Feet Under gets it really right.
Mm.
It's very true, I feel like, to the type. I'm trying to think of some other examples where it's like not at all, like doesn't make any sense. I mean, I think the process of embalming is so like I mean, it is like just in general a ridiculous process. So there's a lot of room for like, I don't know, making it I don't know. I've heard and seen a lot of things. So if it does like if it doesn't bother me if it's like
Yeah,
not not portrayed appropriately. I suppose maybe if it was like even I don't know, even Bernie, which isn't these aren't horror movies, but like the
Jack
Linklater
Black.
movie Bernie. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
loved it. I thought it was great. I thought that actually really nailed it too. So
Well, so for me, it doesn't, I guess, doesn't necessarily deal with funeral directors, but it feels
mhm.
deals with the process of burying somebody.
Oh yeah.
When my brother passed away a couple years ago, when we were at the funeral, we were at the cemetery, and I don't. This is the only funeral I've been to, so I don't know if it was specific to this cemetery. But after they lowered the coffin, then they placed a really like thick cement barrier.
Yeah.
They lowered it on top of that.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, well, all the zombie movies you see, like them crawling
Yeah.
out, the sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
so is that something that they do in other states? Like, is that just the process? You
Yeah.
lower concrete down on the.
No, that's a very good point, Miguel. All those zombie movies, those people all must have been naturally buried because a big part of natural burial is no concrete vault. Most cemeteries will have the concrete vault. It's not really state by state. It's a cemetery regulation. You don't have to. It's not like required by law, but most cemeteries will put a concrete vault in the ground so that the ground stays level and it's very easy to maintain like lawn care. If you don't have
Okay.
that, the ground can really sink and just become uneven and it just looks bad. And so a lot of people or cemeteries will make it a rule of their cemetery that you have to have the concrete vault. And it's sold to people as though it's like a more protective environment for the casket. Like,
Hmm.
the elements aren't getting in, which is not true. It's just like a big waste of time and money and concrete, honestly. So
Yeah.
very good point. Those zombie movies those are the natural burials. Like I practice now.
Well, that's because my brother was in the Marines, and so when he passed away, he was buried in a
Military
military
cemetery.
thing. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm assuming that's the regulation there.
absolutely.
Yeah. So what is the so it sounds like the negatives of the concrete burial. What are some of the positives of a natural burial, like you call
Well, you can crawl out of the grave,
it? And
obviously.
that sounds good to
I
me.
mean,
Yeah.
if yeah, if you gotta get out. So that's one huge one. And also you're just not putting all those like wasteful chemicals, like no embalming, obviously, no metal caskets, no concrete, very energy intensive materials going into the ground that are just kind of sitting there, taking up space and probably ruining the earth in the process. So you get to go back into the earth in the most natural way possible. You can be buried in a shroud if you want, and just kind of decompose as nature intended.
So when you say a shroud, you mean no casket, just in a shroud and just put into the dirt? Is that right?
Yep, you can. Yes, that is
Okay.
possible. Yeah. A lot of people
Uh,
opt for just like a wooden casket, like a rigid container, though. Yeah.
yeah. So for me, I am thinking of a cremation, like
Yeah.
all the way, like just
Yeah.
cremation. But is there a negative? I'm sure there's negative impacts to everything, but is there a negative impact to like cremation to the environment? I'm sure like all the smoke going in the air or something like that, or
Yeah, that is. I mean, but it also takes an incredible amount of energy to heat up the oven, the retort. It takes about as much energy as it would to drive. I want to say like 40 miles or something like that. So or maybe it's even more. I used to have this stat memorized, but it's incredibly energy intensive to heat that much space and let a body burn for that long. So yeah, they have options, not in Texas yet because it's Texas, but they have passed laws in other states where you can do like a water cremation or recompose, which is becoming soil, like human composting, basically. And that's all less energy intensive. The water cremation is a reduction by putting you in like a solvent of water solution, and it doesn't take as much energy. So you're still getting reduced to ash, but not using heat and
How long does that process
emitting
take?
smoke, I guess. I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, I apologize for interrupting, but
Yeah,
how long does that process take?
oh, about a day.
About a day, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
The human composting, I don't actually know. I think that takes longer. That's a very, very new process, but it's a really exciting one. But I think that might take longer. But believe that the water cremation, the alkaline hydrolysis, and cremation, just the flame cremation, can take 8 hours, 8 to 12 hours. Yeah, depending on the size of the person. Yeah.
Okay. Or depending on the size of the person. I know
Yeah.
that was the end of me. I get
No,
it.
I mean, like a child. No, I don't
Yeah.
want to say it, but a small
Yeah.
person can take a while too. So you would be surprised. You'd be surprised.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot recently of like alternative things to do with the body, like planning, like you could turn into a tree or something like that, or
Yeah.
like those other
Yeah.
things. Do you put any stock in those or?
Um, I mean, they're good for like getting the conversation started and like, making an effort. You're planting a tree, but a lot of those things have to do with like attaching your cremains to like the tree plant, and your cremains, when they go into the ground, they're basically like inert. They don't have any biological like effects anymore. They're not beneficial. It's just ash. So it's not like it's supplying the tree with any nutrients. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, okay, you just planted a tree. That's nice. And the remains are there, but you're not, I don't know. If you really want to become a tree, I mean, you have to put your whole like self in the ground and let the worms eat you and the maggots eat you and let nature like run through you, basically. So
Okay.
I mean, I feel like your audience can handle this kind of talk,
Oh, definitely,
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, not concerned about that at all. But so I guess I'm sure you've been asked a bunch of times, but what do you have a plan for your end of life care?
For my care or for
Oh,
my
no, I'm
like
sorry,
death?
end of life, like yeah, when you
My
pass away.
burial. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
a place picked out, a grave picked out at the cemetery that I work at and that I co-founded and run.
Okay.
It's just like under the mesquite trees in the field. They're kind of close to our main pavilion. So
Well, so
natural
let's talk
burial all
about
the
that.
way. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Campo de Estrellas Conservation Cemetery in Bastrop County.
Mhm.
So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, it's a 9-acre former cattle pasture in Bastrop County. It's just right outside of Smithville, if anybody local knows what I'm talking about. That my co-founders had purchased this land, wanting to restore it to its like original state. It had been really damaged by like overuse of agriculture practices. There was cattle on there for a really long time. I think there was some like farming years ago. And so it was really in bad shape. And they definitely didn't want anything else to be developed on it. It's out in a like, kind of a rural community. And they were like, we also want to be buried on our land. So they have a farm next to it. So wondering how they could do that. And we have a mutual friend who got me involved in the project, and we were able to get the 9 acres deeded as a cemetery and start doing some conservation practices on there, replanting and putting up like wild turkey feeders and some bird feeders, and planted like over 1,000 trees, I think, which after the summer, I don't really know how many are surviving still, sadly. But anyway, and then we kind of mapped out plots or gardens so that people can be buried amongst this rehabbed land. And it's turned out really nice. It's a really beautiful, peaceful spot. If anybody is interested, you can hit me up. I'll take you out there and we can show you around.
Yeah, I mean, let's give your socials and how people can
Sure.
reach you and support you right now.
So campodeestrellas.co is our website, which has all of our information and a nice video about our projects. And the Instagram handle is Campostella, and it's CAMPOSTELLA burials. That's the Instagram. So you can find us on Instagram or our website. We've done a lot of podcasts and videos and some articles so you can read and see what we've been up to. And then there's information about how to purchase a plot if you're interested, or you just want to make a plan and come out and talk about what we do. We also do workshops pretty much every quarter where you can come out. We just did one last spring, I think was our last one. And you can come out to the land. We talk about the history. We talk about the process of natural or green burial. And then we do like a mock kind of burial, which is really interesting, where you can be like carried to the grave and then like we lower you down. It's really quite something if you're interested.
All right, so that reminds me of the song "Is Anyone Out There?" 3 6 Mafia. Do you know that song?
I do.
Where he gets
shout out 3 6. Gotta just bring it up.
Yeah, well, he gets I think he's in an insane asylum, and he wants to break out, and he pays off the janitor or whatever, and then he wakes up in the casket and finds that the janitor is in there with him as well. So like you're telling me a mock burial and I wake up in an actual
we don't put anyone in a casket. It's a shroud. Okay. And usually we, if you want to participate as the body, we have somebody who already does, who like one of our members who will be the body. But if somebody wanted to participate, so we're not forcing anyone to be the person. There are, I've done like living funeral ceremonies where they like take you through your own, like you are the body and you die and all this stuff. And that's really fascinating as a practice too. It's honestly one of the most psychedelic things I think I've ever done, but we don't force anyone and we don't actually put somebody deep into a hole. We just lay you on top of the grave and we mark it out. So not quite.
I get you.
Your fantasy, but I know what you mean.
No. Not fantasy. Have you ever had, when you're doing a mock burial, have you ever had somebody just be really affected by it and like just kind of breaking down? Because I don't know how I would have reacted.
Yeah, I know. We didn't really know either until we did it. And my co-owner, so I own it with a mother and son, and the mom is the person who volunteers as the body, and her son, he was like, he didn't show it at the time, but later he was like, that really affected me, like seeing my mom like putting the shroud over her face and then like carrying her over to like a grave. He has said several times how like deeply affected he was by that, but he was like, I tried to hold it together. So yeah, I think absolutely that's kind of part of it, kind of part of the point, I guess, a little bit, is to really draw people in like that. Because that's the kind of stuff that's, I think grief is, it's terrible. It feels really bad, but it's like a big part of the fear of death, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, Sarah, I can kind of talk to you about this kind of all day. I'm fascinated. I know. You're a really great guest, but we have to move on to our movie. But
okay.
What I will say for the listeners is that Sarah and I are going to continue our conversation on the post show called Sunday School Sessions. That's on Patreon. So if that's something you want to listen to, it's patreon.com/myhorrorconfessional. So Sarah, you're here to confess your horror sin of never having watched Cube from 1998. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So let's back up just a bit. We talked a little bit about, your mom saying that you should go into being a funeral director as a child. What was your history with horror movies, horror literature as a child? Were you into that?
Yeah, I was. Again, I never I didn't consider myself like a horror fan through and through. I still don't really, but now having like prepared for this podcast, I was like, wow, that's really been like a big interest or something. I've always gravitated to the genre. But obviously like as a kid, the scary stories, loved it. But they terrified me. Horror movies like they were so scary to me that like, I remember seeing Halloween. I think you'll know this. Is it Halloween 4 where he puts the thumb through the head?
Yeah, at the very beginning. Yeah.
I mean, I watched that on like a Saturday afternoon, bright daylight out at a friend's house in like the middle of the summer. And I was so shook. I was so scared. I think I cried for like several nights in a row and like had to have the light on. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah.
scared. And my friends just thought it was so funny. Like I grew up with a group of friends who thought that stuff was just a delight. And I just took horror so seriously that it just like terrified me.
Well, that's so interesting because like if I were to see a real like life dead body, I would probably faint. And
I
you work
know.
with those so often, but
Uh,
like when like I'm watching horror movies, I'm like, that guy got his head chopped off or something like that, and I can watch no problem. Fake blood, no problem. Real blood, like I'm squeamish.
it's really, yeah, I think I actually heard it put to me once when I was working in the funeral home in Milwaukee that there's a difference between like dead blood and live blood. So like blood coming out of a live person is honestly like really hard for me. But blood coming out
Okay.
of like a dead person, much easier.
Jeez.
I don't know, but that like that distinction made a lot of sense to me actually. So I like seeing people like slashers and stuff, not really my thing. Definitely like the horror, like psychological stuff. And yeah, like just the creepy, like unsettling vibe is really where I gravitate. But then, I went through that phase as a teen because I was like the right age for the Scream movies, the I Know You Did Last Summer movies, all of those. And I saw every one of those in the theater. I would like opening day. And Scream is one of my like top fives, like I just love
Nice.
it. So I guess I kind of as I grew up, I started to like be able to handle it more.
Okay. And how about you, like with your group of friends? Were they into similar interests, like with horror
Mhm.
movies and like in kind of like well, maybe not the funeral directing stuff, but
Well,
like,
actually, no. My like good friend from high school who we worked in the nursing home together, she also became a funeral director, and
oh,
we were
nice.
very like we got. I mean, then we were fascinated by serial killers. Like we had that whole phase in high school, and she was extremely fascinated by like Ted Bundy. And I feel like I'm glad that I got that out of my system before like the whole true crime like really took off in the last like couple of years. I don't know because and that we can get into that, but like I mean, my family's from Milwaukee, and we were in Milwaukee like the weekend that the Dahmer stuff was going down, and it was just like
Okay.
this ongoing like topic of conversation in my family. It's just like where that's kind of inserted itself into our lives, and then a lot of funeral directors that I worked with in Milwaukee actually like handled Dahmer victim bodies, and so I had this just like whole serial killer like phase for many years, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's gotten to a point where it can be a bit exploitive.
Totally.
But yeah, I completely understand the fascination with serial killers. I'm from Chicago, and so I grew up like John Wayne
Right.
Gacy.
Right.
So
Right.
I grew up in Franklin
Right.
Park, which isn't very Franklin Park, which isn't very far from Des Plaines, where the house was.
Right.
And we would like drive past, and at that point it had been torn down, I believe, and it was just a plot of land or something like that. But so I get the fascination with it.
Yeah. It it's strange. It's almost more like horrific to be like empathetic with the victims now. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just like the lives that they've had to, or like that their families and things have had to endure ever since, and just like seeing it play out in this like
Yeah,
murdertainment or whatever. It's terrifying.
like I see people like who rock serial killer t-shirts like Charles Manson and
Wow.
Richard Ramirez and stuff like that. And it's like
Oh,
that's extreme. And I
dude.
wouldn't do that. You shouldn't
Yeah.
be turning these people into idols, and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So that's one of my issue with it. But you're right, that's another topic that we can go out for
Is
a
it?
bit.
Yeah.
But so then I did want to know, how did this particular movie pass you by? Is it just one that you hadn't heard of? Or you had heard of it, just hadn't, get a chance to watch it?
Okay, I think it definitely passed me by because I don't actually know if it got like a US release date when I was like looking into it. I feel like it was on the Sci-Fi Channel only and I never had cable like
Okay.
especially during that era, like we definitely didn't have cable. So it was definitely not going to be on my radar until I started, I think. Um I think maybe the first time I heard about it was maybe in college, but then it got brought up again like maybe a year or two ago. I can't remember, in one of the discords I'm in or something, or maybe a couple of them. But I think just the discussion around like surveillance state and stuff, and
That's a good point.
Cube
Yeah.
Cube came up as like, this movie rocks. and then
Yeah.
and then I kind of forgot about it, like wasn't really, I don't know, wasn't going out of my way to find it. And then when I saw it on your list, I was like, yeah, you know what, this one, I've been in this, like, this era of like movie 1997 to 2000. I've been really going back and watching a lot of movies from that time. I love the way they look. I love kind of like the ideas that people were working with. It was just a really kind of transitional time, I think, at least in American or North American culture. And so I like pre 9/11 stuff. Basically, I'm really fascinated by like what people were like concerned about, you know.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
this, and then we have like in this movie, we have a character to kind of like latch onto who's like that,
100%,
which is
100%.
Holloway, So
Holloway, my
yeah.
girl.
So okay, so Cube from 1998, directed by Vincenzo Natali. He's done In the Tall Grass. He did the Tremors TV pilot, which was written by Andrew Miller, who's one of the actors in this movie, and he also did Nothing. That's the name of the movie, and he did that with two of the actors in this movie, so they have a connection. They have a recurring relationship. And it was written by, I know I'm going to butcher this name, but it's Andre Bichelik. So three people wrote it: Andre Bichelik, Graham Manson, and the director Vincenzo Natali.
Mm-hmm.
Andre Bichelik didn't really do much afterwards on IMDb, I should say. Not that this value his life
In
or anything,
life.
but
Yeah, the guy did nothing.
yeah, he's a loser.
Yeah.
But Graham Manson went on to become the creator of Orphan Black and the TV show Snowpiercer, which is kind of cool. And then when all these actors, so there's only 7 actors in this movie, and one of those is gone after the first scene or whatever.
Yeah.
But the majority of these actors, they were Canadian TV actors. So this is a Canadian production. As Sarah was saying, it was released in Canada and also like in Spain and other places around the world. But so the actors are Nicole DeBoer, she played Levin, Nikki Guadagni, sorry for that pronunciation. Let me try that again. Nikki Guadagni, she did Ready or Not and Lars and the Real Girl, and she plays Holloway. David Hewlett, he was in Shape of Water and Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. He plays Worth. Andrew Miller, who I was shocked, not really shocked, but shocked to find out is not actually autistic. He played Kazan, and he's also been in None, which is directed by the same director of this one. And then Julian Richings, who's in Urban Legends, he plays Alderson. Wayne Robson, who's in Wrong Turn, he plays Renee, or is it Rennis? I've already forgotten. Rennis, yeah. And then Maurice Dean Wint, and he was in Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and he plays Quentin.
Yes. Oh, I think it's Ren. Sorry, I was like
Ren
for a second. Ren. Yeah, the Ren of Attica.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. So, a real quick summary of it. A group of strangers find themselves trapped in a maze-like prison. It soon becomes clear that each of them possesses the peculiar skills necessary to escape if they don't wind up dead first. So for me, I thought the concept of this movie was real cool, real good, and a couple years before Saw.
Okay, I've never seen the Saw movies, but this is what everybody says. It's like all about, it's like a, yeah.
Okay.
Saw 1.0 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So you haven't seen the original Saw either. So I can understand, like, after the first Saw, it kind of devolves a bit, but is there a particular reason you haven't seen Saw? Is it because you're like torture porn? I'm not really interested in it, or?
Yeah, like that's what I had always heard about it. But then recently I had, even before I saw Cube, I was like, should I just watch Saw again? Like, should I just finally like see this movie? I think because there was like a new one that had come out with like Chris Rock or something. And considering watching that, I was like, I don't know. And then so I might still just rewatch it, because I think that is also a lot of commentary on like the time that it came out. And I'm just curious to know Yeah, like what's going on with Saw? It
Yeah,
seemed horrific to me when it came out. Like I was like, no fucking way am I seeing that movie. But you know,
yeah.
now.
Uh, I revisited recently at the Draft House with the Terror Tuesdays. They played it within the last
Okay.
year or so, and I was always like, "Yeah, Saw's fine, but it's torture porn. And I'm not interested in it." And then I saw it again. I was like, I saw it. I saw it again, and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's actually a good movie. It's kind of like Nightmare on Elm Street Part One
Right.
is a completely different movie than the rest of the series.
Right.
Whereas like Part One is like straight up trying to terrify you and trying to be like a scary movie, and it's
Hmm.
the other ones are like cracking jokes for the most part, sort of thing. That's kind of like
Right.
what Saw is. So
Okay.
yeah, I would just recommend it if you ever get a chance to it. It's not probably not what you think it is.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Will
So just a bit of background on the movie. So the director, Vincenzo Natali, it said that he did not have confidence in financing the film. So what he ended up doing is reduce the cost of his pitch to the single set, where they would be reusing it over and over and using unknown actors to kind of get the budget for the movie. As the most expensive element, the cube, it was actually a cube and a half, was built off of the floor to allow the surroundings to be lit from behind all walls of the cube. So in 1990, Natalia had the idea to make the film, which is set entirely in hell. But in 94, while working as a storyboard artist, he completed the first script. And then the initial draft had more of a comedic tone. There was a surreal images, there was a cannibal, there was like edible moss growing on the walls, and then a monster that kept roaming the cube. So his co-writer and roommate and childhood friend, Andre Bichelik, helped him to strip down to the central idea, the essence that there's people avoiding deadly traps in a maze.
Mhm.
And scenes outside the cube were deleted. The identities of the victims were changed. Sometimes they were accountants, sometimes they were all criminals. But the implication was that their banishment to the cube was part of a penal sentence. And one of the most important dramatic changes was the removal of food and water for a more urgent escape. So after he wrote Cube, Natali developed a short film called Elevated, and it's set in an elevator to show investors how Cube would hypothetically look and feel. And so they kind of lit it to look exactly how it's going to be lit in Cube and all that. And that's what they used to get the budget to make Cube. And the budget was, they say 600,000, but it was really 300,000 because the digital effects were all done for free by the company that did digital effects because they wanted to support Canadian filmmaking. And I thought that the digital effects held up pretty well for 1998. It's
Oh,
what,
they're amazing.
25 years later. Yeah, yeah, 25 years later, 20, almost 26. So yeah, I thought they looked great. Yeah, you said you thought they looked good as well.
Oh, I loved it. I love the detail of like just stripping it down to, these people like trying to escape and getting rid of all the like the roaming monster, the edible moss walls or whatever. Cause that's like all this movie needed to be was just like the terror of being trapped and like not knowing how to get out. And yeah, that urgency of like no food and water. But I loved, if we can just get into it, like
Yeah,
Ren dying and like the face like molding, like crumpling it, like he gets burned, I think acid on his face or something like this, and like that just looks great, and it still looks great. I don't know, it looks as good as any CGI or whatever today, or even the like there was a trap where a bunch of wires shoot out and then they like twist and
yeah,
maybe like cheat, like slice through somebody. Like it sounds great and it looked great. And it was because it was so minimal. It didn't have all these like crazy other things happening. It's just like you can imagine like really sharp wire like slicing through somebody.
yeah. And I thought that it was really well, like because as horror fans, we're used to, specifically in slashers, we're used to like having the masked killer, the villain, the known villain, right? And this one, it's kind of hinted at who the villain is, but you never ever know.
Yeah.
And it's just the horror that is outside and also inside. I just thought it was a
Yeah.
really well made, really well executed concept, and like you said,
Hmm.
the special effects look great as well. So all right,
Definitely.
So starting off, so I just take notes, and
Yeah.
then if you take notes or not, we could just go
Yeah,
back
I
and
have
forth or
some notes.
whatever. But so first of all, we see the movie starts and we see some eyes and they're kind of freaky. I don't really like eyeball violence. If you've ever seen Unchen Adelu, uh,
Yeah.
which yeah, with the
Slicing
slicing,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, not the biggest fan, but
Eyeball violence. I haven't quite put it that way. That's really good.
yeah. Um, so probably not.
There's so much eyeball violence though.
Yeah,
Like you can't really get away from it.
well, it's like in Zombie, if you've ever seen Zombie or
Mhm.
anything like that. But if you can't answer this, feel free. You
Okay.
don't have to answer. But what happens to? Do you know what happens to an eyeball when it's decomposing? Like, does it ever
Mhm.
pop?
No, it deflates.
It just deflates.
Yeah, it like deflates and actually they yeah, like all because it's a lot of liquid in there. And so a lot of that stuff just drains, starts to like drain and desiccate. So it just gets really like deflated. Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, I can get more
get
into like
as much
okay,
details
so
as
if
you
you were
want.
to like embalm a body and do a preparation for an open casket with using chemicals, like there's a lot of injections that go into like around here to make it rounder and appear as though like, you know, it's still a live eyeball. Otherwise it'd be kind of sunken.
It would be so. Oh, so are like
Mhm.
the eyeballs the first thing to kind of go because there's yeah, if it's full of liquid, I would.
Right. Yeah. I mean, pretty, yeah. It just everything dehydrates really quickly, especially if you've been in cold storage. That's like really dehydrating to your tissue. And so a lot of that stuff needs to be kind of plumped up. So honestly, like some of that stuff is like what people put in their face fillers and stuff now. So you're plumping all of this area up. Then you'd also put like a little cap over the eye so that the eyelid stays completely closed and doesn't like shrink because your skin is shrinking back a little bit too. So
Okay.
you would, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
They don't explode. That's really, yeah. I mean, okay, it would explode in the sense if, and I have seen this, if you're in like a, maybe this is like Sunday school session talk, but like if you're in a hot room and decomposing and you're swelling, then you would.
All right. I like that. Let's save that for the Sunday school
Okay,
session.
okay.
I just say that the setting is amazing. Like this, it's a cube shaped room with illuminated panels,
That's great.
geometric shapes all over the wall, and the doors on each side. There's doors on each side. And I thought for a low budget film, they really got the most um out of the set design. I mean, it looks great. I never like I realized once immediately that so what they were doing is they were changing the light panels
Yeah,
on the in the room.
yeah,
And so like one would be green, one would be red to give the impression that there's more than one cube, but really there's only the one cube and then like a small amount of the other cube for them to be looking into a cube. So when they shoot them, you're not seeing just like blank space or whatever. So it's like a cube and a
yeah.
quarter of a cube. And I just thought it was so ingenious to use your budget that way to just kind of like going in and out of the same cube.
Yeah, the design is incredible. I thought the designs on the cube reminded me of like computer chips, even though I mean I want to kind of talk about that in a minute, but like there's it gives it's giving technological horror, but it's not really, you know what I mean? Because it's just like it looks like you're inside of like a computer chip or something, but you're not. You're in this just like really, I don't know, crazy designed cube. And yeah, it felt like, you know, it felt like a play, it felt very like play like if you were to put this on the stage and you had a limited amount of space and, you know, actors and sets to work with, and you just kind of moving them to give the impression of moving through a larger space than you have.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like I really appreciated that because I think I've seen other movies that try to kind of like do the filmed play thing. And this one I thought did that exceptionally well. Not making it too like hokey or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like I've read reviews on this where people were saying that like the acting was bad or the acting held it down or held it back a little bit.
Yeah,
But I mean, the acting wasn't that bad for me. It did feel like at one time it felt like a play. I really like those
I did too. So
one set location movies. I feel like you're kind of depending on your actors to kind of carry it. Um,
definitely.
and I think they did a pretty decent job. Some of the acting was well when we get to what's that character's name? Kazan. That was a
Hmm.
bit. uh I don't know how I feel about that. We can talk about
Yeah,
that when we
yeah,
get
yeah,
there.
yeah.
That was a bit rough, but
I,
okay.
well,
Okay.
I did think for like the acting, I mean, I don't think it was the acting. I think the script was kind of bad in some parts. Like,
The
at one
dialogue.
point, I think, yeah, like Holloway says, like, holy, holy cats. And it's like, okay, like this is real. And you could just tell that, like, I mean, but to this credit, like, every line was in service of moving it really far forward, moving the plot, like, as far forward as possible. So, like, Quentin had like a lot of information rich like lines, and did his absolute. I mean, what a remarkable actor that man. I loved him. It's he did a really good job with that role, I thought.
Well,
But yeah,
yeah,
the
because
script was a little corny.
he did a great job specifically because he was kind of playing two characters. Like the first character, he's the
Yes.
hero, and then he switches over to the villain,
Hmm.
and he does
Hmm.
a great job. Like it's literally a
Amazing.
switch for him. So in the beginning of the movie, a man wakes up here, and I believe that this is his name is Alderson, right? We don't see him very much. And he opens one door and he tries the floor, and what was it? He checks to see if it's okay, and then he enters another room. He takes one step, and he's immediately sliced by all these wires that you're talking about.
He's cubed.
He's cubed. And this reminds me of 13 Ghosts, or they do a
Oh,
similar slicing thing, or even like
okay.
this, The Cell. Have you seen The Cell with Jennifer
Yeah.
Lopez?
Oh,
Where
definitely
they,
the cell. It's giving the
the,
cell for sure.
yeah, the horse, that sort of thing. But it looks really great, and it looks disgusting. And you see his fingers sliced off
Yes.
and everything. Just
It's body slices at the Museum of Science and Industry in
yes,
Chicago.
I
My
went
I
to
was obsessed with that staircase where they have all those body slices. Loved it.
there. There was an older man who was like in the Navy, like World War II, and you could see his like tattoo.
Yes. Yes, I
That
remember this.
that was before I had a tattoo, and I
Uh-huh.
was like, that is terrifying. I don't ever want to get it. Now I'm covered in tattoos, but
Yeah, right.
that that exhibit is like Bodies. I think it was called Bodies or something like that.
Okay, well there's bodies, the exhibit, but then in the Museum of Science and Industry, there is just like a staircase that has
Oh
sliced panels
yes,
of
yeah, yeah,
like, people. But yes, the bodies exhibit, goddamn, is that is something we should talk about in Sunday school sessions.
because they had a pregnant lady. They had a pregnant
Yes.
lady with the, oh my god.
With the fetus,
I'm
yeah.
writing that down
Yeah.
to remind us. But okay, so so he's dead, and the scene fades to white, and we get the title card Cube. So then we're in another room. A bloody hand reaches out from below, and it's Quentin. And there's a passed out dude on the floor, which is Worth. Now, we didn't talk about this yet, but all of the characters' names are related to prisons,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So we got Levin and Worth, Leavenworth, the French guy, Rennes, that's a French prison. Quentin is San Quentin, and then Holloway refers to prison in England.
Mhm.
So there's that. So we have Quentin and we have Worth, and then a woman enters the cube kind of slowly, and Quentin grabs her, thinking she was the enemy. Turns out it's Holloway. I really, really liked Holloway, the character. It sounds like you did too.
I mean, I like to hate her, even though I'm like, look, that's me. If I was going to be a character in this, like that's totally me. But I get she's also like insufferable in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? But um, so yeah, Holloway is immediately like conspiracy theorists. Like the government is up to this. We're just like, you know cogs in the, or well, that comes later, I suppose, but she's pretty conspiracy minded, like right off the bat, as to like what the reason behind them being here is.
Yeah. And
And
then
I felt it
when she's proven right later on,
totally.
you
Yeah.
guys
And
right.
it's like it's that troubling thing where there's like always a kernel of truth in every conspiracy, and that's what's so maddening about like talking about them or thinking about them. Is like they stem from some truth, but they can really ruin your life and like your perspective. You don't check it, but there's always like it's always stemming from something is kind of true about what you're saying. You know what I mean? Which is
Yeah.
really scary.
Yeah.
I loved it.
So then they hear screams coming from another room. So the Q, I'm just gonna call him Q. Q goes over and gets her. So now we have 4 people now. And from the top, an older man drops in, and that's Renz. And the man says that the cells are kind of booby trapped. And this is when who says holy holy cats?
It's
Was that
Holloway. Holloway
Holloway?
said that,
Yeah, I was like, what the hell?
yeah.
And then so the old man or Ren takes off his shoes and throws them into the other door, into the other room, and they are immediately set on fire. So he has a more of a like direct way of finding out whether a room is safe to go in or not.
Mhm,
And he kind of bypasses the whole numbering system that it was all based on. And
mhm,
so later on, this comes to it really fucks him over. But
mhm.
so then this is where they ask, does anybody remember how they got there? And this is where Holloway says it was pierogies,
Yeah,
which I love me some pierogies.
I do too. I got
Hillary
really
is
hungry.
Polish, and we get
Oh,
pierogies.
yeah.
But they do kapusta, which is the
Oh,
cabbage
okay.
inside. I don't fuck with that. I don't
You need the
like
potato.
potato, egg and
Fuck
potato,
yeah.
or
Hell
cheese and
yeah.
potato, I should say.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Get that
Yeah.
cabbage out of here.
Yeah, get that fucking cabbage out of here. They don't listen to this podcast.
Yeah, no, I thought that was interesting about like the Ren. He comes in kind of hot, kind of cocky because he's like been he's an escape artist, right? Like he's
Yeah.
he's a former prisoner. Quentin knows him right off the bat. Well, he doesn't know him right off the bat, but he comes to recognize him and he's like, oh shit, this is the Ren of Attica. He's like famous for escaping all these prisons. Or every imprisonment he's been in, and Ren's like, yeah, fucking follow me, or you can sit here. What does he say? He's like, something about like I move in a straight line, I think is what he says. He's
Yeah.
like, or you can sit around here and ask big questions, or I'm just gonna move in a straight line and get out of here. And then he's used to he's used to escaping, I feel like, human made places. And I think we come to learn that the cube is not so much human made. It's kind of like a mathematical, like, set it and forget it, like construction that had some human oversight, but then like just was math gone wrong, or maybe gone right.
Yeah.
I don't know. And he couldn't quite get that. He thought he was just dealing on a human level, and that's why he got fucked. That was my read of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they're talking about whether or not it's government or aliens. Once they got into aliens talk, I was like, oh, please don't be aliens. I'd rather
Wait, when did they talk about the aliens? Did Holloway bring that up?
Yeah, so Holloway was like,
okay.
what is it? Is it government or is it aliens? That sort of thing. And then I think Q is just like, well,
Yeah.
let's deal with what's in front of our face right now. Let's calm down. Let's not take it to aliens right away, sort of thing. So that's
Okay.
I think they kind of nipped that in the bud very
Right.
early, which I was happy with. So then we find out that Ren has escaped from all the biggest prisons, and we find out that Quentin knows him. Quentin's a cop as well. It's important to say very early on in this movie, ACAB all day, every day, no matter who it is. And we come to find
the
out
man was
later,
always a villain. Let's be honest.
yeah, and we come to find out later that exactly he was the true villain. So they go next door and they try the boot to make sure it's safe. And while they're doing that, they find numbers in between the rooms, and they're hoping that they're not room numbers because it's in the millions. But they only have like 3 days and Holloway says we only have like 3 days without food and water.
Holloway is a doctor. It's revealed that
yes.
she is a free clinic doctor. So she's like, I think we're led to believe that her conspiracies are born out of having worked in an area of medicine where she sees people getting like screwed over and over again, kind of mercilessly, and because there's some mindless, faceless bureaucracy that leaves an underclass of people that she then is meant to care for. And so a lot of her like cynicism and spite, and I think conspiracy, is born out of like the job that she has. But anyway, she's a doctor, so she has some medical knowledge.
Yeah. No, and I like that because it does come out, it does become helpful later on,
Mm-hmm.
and when she's like helping treat some of the wounded, but also her and Q kind of bump heads because he is
Mhm.
a cop, and she's like a quote unquote bleeding heart. I would assume she'd be a liberal, like a bleeding heart liberal sort of
Yeah.
thing. And he's like, the only reason you exist is because I'm protecting you, sort of thing.
He's an
So
arm of the state. Yeah.
it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
So Holloway starts talking about like starvation and like what happens there. And I feel like you and Holloway would get along if she's
You
talking
think
about
so?
yeah, about
Oh,
starvation.
okay.
You're talking about what happens after you're dead from starvation, that sort of
Okay.
thing. You guys would get along. So then Ren pulls out a button, or he rips a button off of her thing and tells her to suck on it, and it's the button to keep the saliva flowing. I don't know the veracity of that claim. Do you?
No, I thought that was like I don't really know, like actually no, I guess I could see it. I guess I could see it. Because it really doesn't serve any other purpose in the movie except for like, well, they use the button for something else. Maybe we'll get to, which I thought was absolutely hokey. But
Okay,
yeah,
if we get past it and I don't bring
okay,
it up, let me know because I don't recall off the top of my head.
okay,
So then they go to the next room and it's all red. And Ren says, we're not going to go in there because he kind of smells the gas from it. So they go to another room. And Ren asks for Worth's boots, I guess, or something. I don't know, I forget whose boots it is. And he says, you have to save yourselves from yourselves. And he goes next and he lands perfectly fine, no problem. Then he hears something, he turns around and he gets acid thrown right in his face. And the effect looks amazing. The face is
incredible.
bubbling, it's all eaten through. I mean, what did you think of the fact? I think you said you liked it.
Oh, I loved it. I was so glad they went for it. Like I don't know how much of the budget was spent to make that face, but that acid eaten face, but I thought it was money well spent. I also like that like I think Quentin maybe like gives him like a real close look and the wafting like acid smoke is just like getting it. It's like he's,
Smelling
taking a
it.
steam bath with it.
Oh man.
Which was so gnarly.
Yeah. So
That was
they
good.
pull them back to the room, the safe room that they're in, but there's nothing that they can do for them. I could just imagine like the smell that's in
Yeah, it
that
was
room.
gross.
It's got to be messed up. So then they
Yeah.
try to find out why they're in there. So Levin is a student, Worth is an office worker, Quentin is a cop with 3 kids, and so we already know that Holloway is a doctor. So and Quentin says he has 3 kids, and that's where he draws his strength from. And they're trying to ask Worth where he draws his strength from, and he's like, "Well, I got a pretty fine collection of pornography."
Yeah.
And so like Worth is just like you could tell he's like has low self-esteem. He's probably been depressed like his whole adult life. He's a realist, like a pragmatist sort of thing, and he um Q comes to see him as a hindrance later on in the movie.
You calling him cute is like triggering in this day
Is
and
it
age.
Quentin? Okay, Quentin. Oh yeah. Okay, okay.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, Worth is like
Q has the truth.
yeah, cute is the truth. Worth is very just beaten down and I mean he's like the like I feel like the uber rationalist like online or something where he's just like cannot be entertained by anything or hope for anything. It's like what the fuck, dude? Like you're like a white man, like what the fuck's going on with you, you know? But it's like he's seen too much of something, and we eventually learn later, like perhaps why he is this way. But I thought this scene was kind of interesting because not many of the characters aside from Quentin had a lot of love for life. Like everyone's very I mean even Levin's like I'm just a student, I'm worthless, like I don't do anything, I don't know why I'm here, and Worth obviously is like yeah, fuck this, I'm a real piece of shit. And then Holloway is very cynical about just life in general. So I felt like kind of the whole movie they're all trying to go up against the struggle as to like, well, why should we keep
Yeah, why
living?
why are
Like
we fighting this hard? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Which it was so chilling. I mean, that honestly was really great, I think, because it's like what if you feel like it really shined a light on like everyone's like hopelessness and worthlessness that they felt, except for Quentin, he felt very differently. He has a kids and takes a lot of pride in, you know, brutality of civilians.
Yeah. So then we find out that Holloway says that they took all her jewelry, but Levens, for some reason, they left her with her glasses, even though they're only for reading. And so there must be a reason why. And he asks her what she does in school, and he guesses it's math. So what I didn't like is that at very first, Levin was like, if you've ever seen like Night of the Living Dead, just where the main woman Judith, she was just like crying all the time and not able to do anything. She was like in shock, and I thought that that's because I'd seen Cube before, but it's been a very long time, so I didn't really remember much. But I thought like, oh man, are they going to make her the female character who's just in shock and needs to be helped through the whole
the
movie?
like that needs saving or something.
Yeah, and because that's what it seemed like the first couple scenes, because she was just in shock and crying and that sort of thing. But once they introduced the fact that she was a math major or whatever, like she became the most important character for everybody surviving and getting out of here, which I thought was cool. Even though she herself was a bit of a bitch to Kazan, right? Like she was saying mean things to him.
They all were.
Yeah,
Dude, they all it was extremely of its time of being just like so annoyed by somebody who is neurodivergent, and like I thought that was so crazy. But yeah, like she was very, once we get to him, we can discuss more. But yeah, I don't know, like Levin, in terms of like the script and everything, like this is, I get it. It's like we got to hurry up and get through this get to the like good stuff with this movie, but things were very like, what a coincidence. She happens to be like you know, this like incredible math brain, and how it gets drawn out was a little bit clunky, but look, I'm gonna overlook it because
so
things were very like given, easily given, like, oh, of course, like this is our math brain, you know. I don't know, but
see, I thought it was more of like they're giving you the pieces to leave.
True.
And you guys need to figure it out. For example, we find out later in the movie that they were in the room that they needed to be.
Yes.
At the very beginning.
Yes.
And if they
no,
had
this is true.
You know, that's how I took it. There was more like a jigsaw killer, which you don't get that reference, but for other people, there's more like a jigsaw killer overhead. But I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
Yeah. I know you're right. No, you're right. That I think in terms of the story, like it all makes sense, like why these characters were like who they were. I felt like how they arrived at it in the script was a bit clunky for my taste, but I'm just saying. Anyway.
So she looks at the movie. She looks at the numbers between the rooms. Then she goes to another doorway to look at those numbers, and she finds out that if the number is prime, then that room is trapped. And so she says the incinerator, the acid to the face room, the gas room, they all had prime numbers. Now, I went to school for I went to 3 summer schools in a row because of math in 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. So I am just going to say that this was all correct.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about math.
Yeah. The math was the true horror of this movie. Like the amount of like calculating that you would have had to do. I mean, be fucking dead.
At the end of this, they actually hired a mathematician. And after we talk about the movie, I kind of want to talk about everything he went into. Where the math is supposedly found based on this mathematician. So,
I mean, I can only imagine, because it's like it's so sound like it's so prominent in the movie. Like I could see, and I don't know, this director Vincenzo seems like the type of dude who like he would pay attention to the details like that and make sure that those were like way above board.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So now that they have a kind of hint of how to get through rooms, they're like, we hear like a voiceover that they've been at it for like 9 or 10 hours. And they ask how, and Quentin's like, oh, 5 o'clock shadow. The last thing I remember doing is shaving, which was that one I had to give you. That was
good one. Buddy. Very good one. I loved that voiceover part. That was such a weird. That wasn't that also like in the voiceover where they're kind of flirting, him and
him
11, which is very cringy, but like that's like their little meet cute is this like weird voiceover where they're solving puzzles and like it's like the things are spinning and I don't know. It's really silly.
So then Holloway says she needs to smoke This is where we find out a bit more about Quentin. He's actually, this is really weird. He says, so he says he has 3 kids, and then Holloway says, "Oh, it couldn't be me, or I wouldn't do it." And he says, "Yeah, basically, she didn't either," implying that she's dead. And everybody's
Weird.
like, "I'm sorry," and he's like, "No, we're just separated." I'm like, "Oh, if you're separated, she's basically dead." Like that is so fucking weird, which is a hint to his true personality.
Yeah, I know. I kept playing that line over and over in my head because I was like, what the fuck, dude? Like, are you trying to say here? Like, what were you trying to get sympathy? Or yeah, like you're just your wife is dead to you because she's separated from you, which yeah, I think
Yeah,
is the case.
very weird, very weird. So they make it to a room where all the doors are prime, except for the one on the ceiling. So then Quentin climbs up and opens a door, and somebody falls through, and we meet the last person in our troop, Kazan. And we find out very quickly that Kazan is neurodivergent. Um, in the movie, or in the notes of the movie, they say he's autistic um, autistic savant. I don't know if that's a correct term or not. So we'll just say he's neurodivergent, and he starts hitting his head over and over on the wall because it's a red room. Or I'm sorry, he just starts hitting his head over the wall, on the wall, I should say. And right away, I was like, "There's something problematic about this character." I bet you in 1998 they did not get a neurodivergent actor to play this, and we found out later that of course they didn't. You know.
No, I mean he's in a great lineage of many other you know, regular people, or I should say non-neurodivergent people playing neurodivergent characters are Leonardo DiCaprio's and Dustin Hoffman's, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. So then Quentin starts to climb, and Kazan doesn't like that he's climbing. This is where Levin says, "Well, at least he's good for something." Talking about Kazan. So that was the one where I was like, "Okay, she's being a bit of a bitch towards him, a bit
Yeah, the whole
antagonistic."
time. Oh, totally.
So this is Holloway says that she thinks that they might be in Mexico. She's like, the government spending military industrial complex.
Love
She's just
that.
running off things. Like
Yep.
her
Tax
brain is,
dollars, Rich
yeah,
Psychos Entertainment. That, you know, what did I say? Uh, yeah, military industrial complex. Loved it. Every
yeah.
one of them.
And uh, Quentin says it's not that. It's not the military industrial complex. He's like, "I'm part of the machine. Look at me. It's it's not them. It's some rich dude. Some rich dude." He says Scaramanga, which I'm not sure what that is. But he said it's just like you said, some rich guy's entertainment. But Holloway laughs in his face, and she says the single bullet. She says the single bullet theory, huh? You're definitely a cop. So
Yeah.
Holloway enters the room, and she starts choking immediately, and everybody's concerned. But we couldn't find out that she just chokes on her button, which a little bit of levity, or yeah, levity in this.
Yeah, I guess that was like their humor. Yeah. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. So the next room, Quentin enters, and he's surrounded by razor sharp wires that close around him, but he manages to jump out of the way, but he gets sliced in the leg. And Kazan grabs Holloway's hair and like won't let go. So it's that was kind of a scary part, because later on they start saying that he's a liability, which
Hmm.
I won't know if I'll go so far as to say he's not, because come to find out he's very important as well, but he does do things that put other characters in danger, not
Hmm.
through any fault of his own, but
Hmm.
just because he can't help it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, they have to make like accommodations in like what how they behave and what their plan is. And they're extremely pissed that they have to do that for him because they just, you know, want to barrel through and like do it their way. So like having to make any accommodations at all is like a huge
Burden.
reason for them yeah, burden, like reason for them to be so rude to him. But Holloway is like very Kazan really becomes like the not the foil, but like he allows her to show her empathetic side or
Yeah,
something. You know, she takes to him pretty immediately and like works with him and is like very protective of his, his condition. It's fine.
Yeah. So then at this point, Quentin suspects that Worth knew that that room was bad for some reason, and didn't tell him. And so he like gets angry with him about that. So at this point,
Why?
yeah,
Sorry, why did he suspect Worth? I never
I don't
got
understand
that.
other than the fact that he was kind of being like a bit sluggish and like a sad girl, sad boy sort of thing.
Uh-huh,
I think
uh-huh.
he just really hated him because he's like, hey, he's like the coach, like rah rah, let's get. And he wants all of his people to fall in behind him. He even says, like Worth even says a little bit later, he says "Jawohl, Commandant," which is basically like he's acting. Quentin is acting like a Nazi, like a
That's right.
instructor, and he
That's
says
right.
"Jawohl, Commandant." So he's
Yes, that's right.
yeah. So they at this point they decide to rest because they're kind of tired, and Levin needs to figure out the numbers, and then Kazan pees in the corner,
Yeah.
which I thought it was kind of
Disgusting.
funny. With disgusting but funny because I like
Yeah.
that they're like real humans. Like they've been in
No,
here
they
for at least
acknowledge.
12
Yes.
hours, you know?
That's what I thought too. It was like we have to acknowledge this somehow. So
And I
okay.
wish I wish it didn't have to be Kazan because then he's
No
being the
kidding.
butt of a joke. Like
Yes.
literally could have been anybody else, sort of thing. But
True. 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 Okay. So wait, is this where Levin is like? This is where I thought the button thing was hokey. Doesn't she write out with the button like the numbers?
she does it. I think she's doing it a couple times, but it's more prominent later in the movie. But yeah, that doesn't make any sense to
I
me.
don't think that makes any sense. You could
She's
not
writing,
scratch into metal with a plastic button.
yeah, that is ridiculous. That is so. It's got to be something else. If they showed her sharpening it on
I
something,
know.
maybe, but they don't show that
Yeah.
at all.
It's just like the flat edge of a square button rubbing against like a metal cube that they can't break out of.
And also, like,
That's
it's a small square of metal that she's writing on,
it's
and
true.
like we
Yeah.
can see the camera is focused that we can see you're not making any marks. You
No.
know, it's just yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
That
That was silly.
part I didn't believe. Everything else I believe.
Yeah. So yeah, everything else, all other parts of it you believe.
All the
Yeah.
parts perfect.
Yeah. So Quentin at this time has like decided that um Worth is like a little bitch boy. He's just gonna be like picking on him the whole time, bullying him. And he says, "Come on, jump in the sushi machine. Jump in the sushi machine. Be a man." Like, what the fuck does that mean? That's he says, "I don't want to die. I'm just being realistic." So that's so weird. Like, whenever somebody says, "Be a man," like that's something that I'm dealing with. Like I'm dealing through my own trauma, like my own like
Mm,
machismo bullshit that I grew up with in a Latino society and a Latino
mm,
household. But like
mhm,
in this instance, what the fuck are you talking about? That you almost died.
mhm,
What do I have to be a man? Is it a man? Am I being a man by dying? Like what the hell does that
mhm,
mean? It's so stupid.
mhm. Yeah. It's that like internalized misogyny. I guess that is interesting. They don't really address it elsewhere. That like they're here to but he kind of Quentin is very like the way he talks to Levin and is like trying to come onto her pretty much like the whole movie until it really turns and she rejects him, which he doesn't take too kindly to. Is like also like another like layer of creepiness and like he is extremely like as a man I will lead this unit, I will take this bride, I will force other men to man up and do as I do. Like yeah, he's very imposing of all these things.
Big alpha energy,
A
alpha
big alpha
male, quote
energy.
unquote alpha male energy, right? So then Worth yells out, "There's no way out of here." And of course everybody like stops, like, how do you know that?
Record
And
scratch.
we come to find out, yeah, research. Imagine that I did a record scratch during the editing process, but I'm not actually going to do that because I don't have time. So, so we find out that Worth designed the outer shell, just the exterior of it, which is a cube. He doesn't know anything about the numbers or the traps or anything like that, and he doesn't know who built it. So I was a bit surprised here by this because at first he said he was an office worker early in the movie, and I didn't think about it, but something like of this nature would need a designer or something,
Totally.
right? So I
Totally.
liked that aspect of it. What did you think here?
I mean, I loved it. I love the line that Holloway says afterwards, where she's like, "You build a widget in Saskatoon, suddenly it's an essential cog in a death machine," and that's so the vibe I feel like of working today. I mean, just in capitalism in general. Like, if we're to expand this out to just like an overarching theme of like working under capitalism, where we all have these really small parts that just prop up this death machine of a system that we all live in.
Yeah.
But I think maybe if I'm to project from my own life, like working in tech feels this way too, where like we are just like, uh, you work on your little code here, or you write your little content for this or whatever, but it like all supports like a really bad company that is like, watching us all the time, where we're like forced to like act constantly and to try to get out of, you know, wherever we're stuck.
Yeah.
I I thought it was really prescient. And yeah.
It's just like when if you think of drones, a couple years ago,
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago, drones were like a thing that people played with. They go to the park and they attach a camera and all that or stuff, maybe more than 10 years ago. And now drones are used in war to kill
But
people.
no, they were first used in war. They were always
Oh,
they were a military device
oh,
before
and it
anything.
was
That's what was so chilling about them becoming like, these like at-home device cameras, is because these were like literally devised to pinpoint kill civilians. And people who fly them don't have any idea of like what they were doing. I remember watching actually a documentary about them when, like years ago, we were looking into doing drone photography, and I was trying to get a sense of the history of them, and it was so dark. Like the history of drone capture and like military tools was so incredibly dark. These people, like a lot of the soldiers who were flying the drones, had like insane PTSD from just like being so removed from the like, kind of like what Worth was explaining, like being so far removed from what horror they were inflicting on people, but like,
yeah.
doing it from just this like one little part. It's crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really crazy.
So they're saying like basically they keep everyone separated. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Holloway, like she's like, I knew it. Like her whole life,
Mm-hmm.
she was right. Nobody's ever gonna call her paranoid again.
Right.
And then she's like, we got to get out of here and blow the lid off of this thing. I
Yeah.
love the energy. I absolutely love
Yeah.
that energy. Yeah.
Boy, oh, Holloway, little do you know.
So the
Little do
Worth
you know.
Worth says, what are you talking about? Nobody's in charge. Big Brother's not watching you. He says there's nobody up there. Somebody might have known, but they got fired or they moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a failed public works project.
Yeah.
And it's just a clear conscience and a fat paycheck.
Yeah. I wrote that down too.
Yeah, and you have to use it. And the reason they're using it is because you have to use the cube or admit that it was pointless and they spent billions and billions of dollars on this pointless thing. And I think
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but like that's the probably most terrifying part of it is
Mm-hmm.
this money was just used to kill like the citizens of that country, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody knows who's like using it anymore, and
Mm-hmm.
what its original purpose was and what its
Mm-hmm.
purpose now is, and like who's
Mm-hmm.
who's who's kidnapping these people and throwing them in there, or they're just doing their job, and like
Exactly.
who's cleaning up the bodies afterwards, like they're just doing their job, like
Yes. It's
you know
capitalism, baby. I know it
yeah
just keeps it going and going because like everybody has to survive. And I feel like part of this concentrated series of events too is like they're just doing what they have to do to survive, even without like really questioning, do they want to continue like surviving? Because it sounds like you maybe don't, Levin, and it sounds like Worth maybe you don't, but you're just programmed. We're all just programmed by this like, society that we live in to just keep at all costs like figuring out the next like puzzle, or where like escaping the little trap or whatever. It's no matter how it degrades us.
yeah
um
it's a bit deeper in a horror movie than I thought I was going to be
totally.
getting, which
Totally.
I definitely appreciated.
I
There's
dig
some
it.
horror movies that try 10 times as hard to be as poignant as this movie is, with just its like small budget and 7 characters and that sort of thing. And it's I think they did a pretty good job of that,
Mhm.
you know.
It's very I mean, it says it in like all the bios of it too, but it is very Samuel Beckett-esque if anybody has read any of Beckett's work, but I think he does a similar thing. But
Okay. I'm familiar with Samuel Beckett, but I haven't read any of his work. So I wouldn't be able to tell you, but I'm sure
yeah,
there's smart people out there that would be able to.
smart and dumb people. But you know, that's smart.
So they say life's too complicated. The reason we're here is because it's out of control. And for some reason, like Quentin whoops Worth's ass just because he's feeling frustrated and he's a big strong man and he has to do it. And he asks them, "Is there a door?" Oh no, I'm sorry. After he gets his ass beat, then Levin goes up to him and asks, basically, "Is there a way out? Is there a door?" He says yes, and he says, she asks where, and he says wherever the door guy put it, which I love that there's a separate door guy.
Yeah,
You know,
it's all everything is siloed, and you
yeah,
just like nobody talks to each other. You just do your little thing.
yeah, and being in corporate, that because I'm in the corporate world, that is completely rings
100%.
true
Yes,
because we're all
absolutely.
so segmented. We only do
Yes.
our one thing, and then we don't ever really know. We just know that it's working, and if it doesn't work, then they need to fix it, or there's something on our end that needs to fix. But then that's it. It's never
Yeah,
connected.
never.
Um, so then he says there's 6 guesses, but it's sealed from outside, right? And then this is kind of where we get the dimensions. The dimensions are 434 feet square, so it's 14 by 14 by 14, 26 rooms high, 26 rooms across, 17,576 rooms. And the inner cube can't be flush with the shell, so there's about 1 cube of space. Sure. This is where I wanted to read.
Sure, go for it.
I wanted to read a bit about the mathematician. So the
Okay,
cube was
okay.
conceived by mathematician David W. Pravica, who was the math consultant. It consists of an outer cubical shell or a sarcophagus and the inner cube rooms. Each side of the outer shell is 434 feet. The inner cube consists of 263, which equals 17,576 cubical rooms, minus an unknown number of rooms to allow for movement, each having a side length of 15.5 feet. A space of 15.5 feet is between the inner cube and the outer cube, or the outer shell, I should say. So each room is labeled with 3 identification numbers, such as 517-478-565. These numbers encode the starting coordinates of the room, and the X, Y, and Z coordinates are the sums of the digits of the first, second, and third number, respectively. The numbers also determine the movements of the room. The subsequent positions are obtained by cyclically subtracting the digits from one another, and the resulting numbers are then successively added to the starting numbers. That's the last we're going to be talking about math
I
on
mean,
this
this,
goddamn
and
podcast.
by the way, Levin wrote, like, she figured this out by using a button on metal. Okay.
Yes, yeah, she is
Freaking genius over here.
a genius, and in some of this,
And
oh
hadn't
no,
eaten in like 2 days.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's honestly, like when you think about the immensity of that, like I don't know what I would do. I would probably be like Worth. I'd be like, what's the point? We're gonna die. Like
Yeah.
there's over 17,000 rooms. What are we doing here?
No, as soon as like I had to figure out a prime number for even just one number, I'd be like, whew, my peace, you
Yeah,
know. But when you were saying all that stuff, I was thinking like it's very when you said like the sarcophagus stuff, but it's very like Egyptian like. I feel like this is like what the Egyptians were doing when they built the pyramids is like all this crazy math.
yeah,
Anyway, aside.
yeah. No, I like it. I like it. So then to find out the numbers are like longitude and latitude, it tells them where they are in the cube. And she does her mathematical magic and or witchcraft, I would say, and
Totally.
finds out that there's 7 rooms from the edge. So that's pretty close.
She gets real close.
But as they get closer and closer, um, the numbers start not making sense to her because the cube that they're in should be outside of the cube. Sure. But they get to the next room and it's sound activated. And we find that out because Kazan like says red because it's a red room, and metal spikes just come up out of everywhere, out of all the
Mhm.
walls and floors and all that sort of stuff. And this is when like Quentin is like, we need to leave Kazan behind and we'll come back for him. And Holloway says, no, you're not going to come back from. That's just a way to make yourself feel better.
Right. Right. We're not gonna continue the system of just leaving the poor and unfortunate behind. We're gonna be better. We're gonna take him with us at all costs.
Yeah. So then they lower Worth into the room and he kind of monkey bars his way down. And then he very carefully opens a door. And so they find out that the door opening isn't enough to make the spikes come out. So they have a certain amount of volume to work with. And so he opens the door, he props it open with a boot. Then Levin goes and Holloway goes, then Kazan goes. And I'm like, damn, Kazan got some upper body strength.
Okay, we have not talked about the physicality of getting through these rooms. Like, you have to have some arm strength for a lot of this shit. Like getting up to the ceiling, monkey bars across like some of these rooms. I would have fallen. I mean, like
100%. I'm staying in like room 3 or something like that. Because like, I'll catch up with you guys. Just
it's asking a lot. It's asking a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're like perfectly symmetrical, so the doors aren't like level with the ground. They're like kind of in the middle. So like you're saying, you have to heave yourself up there.
So it was a lot of work.
I would not have made it up there. I know that for a fact.
Not at all.
So Kazan makes it down and he's walking and he gets stuck. His pants get stuck on the floor that's on the door that's on the floor, and it starts to turn and make noise. And I thought at this point, I was like, the fucking tension has been ratcheted up here. Like, I think they're doing an amazing job of creating that tension here.
Yeah.
But he makes it. Then they all went into the room, but they didn't ask. They didn't know if it was Prime, or I guess no, because the first person to go was Worth, and he went into the room and he didn't check if the number was Prime or not. So like that kind of went out the door.
It did, because he just used the old Ren technique of like, if there's a trap with the sound or whatever. Yeah, they didn't. You're right. They didn't check the number on that. Good call, Miguel.
So Q almost makes it, but Kazan, like, he's so excited by Q making it that he makes a noise, like an excited noise, and that causes all the spikes to come out. And Q barely makes it with his life. And Q, of course, is very upset about this and starts beating Kazan
the way he probably beats his kids and probably beat his wife who left him.
Yeah, and
definitely
Holloway makes that connection. I don't know now, but later on she does. But she says, "Let him go, you Nazi." And then this is the way he gets so angry. He's like, "What'd you call me?" He's like, "I know your type. The only reason you exist is because of me." And then he gets into like her personal life and like her being in a relationship or not being in a relationship and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, he's out of pocket, like way out of pocket.
Right.
He knows nothing about this woman. And he's just kind of going off.
But he makes like, he brackets all of that, or like bolsters it by saying that he is a cop and he knows how to read people super well. Like he pulled that card on someone else. I can't remember. Maybe it was Worth.
Yeah, definitely Worth. Yeah.
Where he was like, and he does use it on Worth again. Maybe has he used it already, where that's how they get the information out of Worth, that he was like building the outer shell, because he basically interrogates him into saying it. So yeah, Quentin is like definitely thinks he knows. He pulls cards on everyone, basically.
Right. So Levin says, "How dare you say that to her?" And then this is where Holloway's like, "No wonder your wife left you.
Yeah.
All that bottled up anger and a thing for younger girls." And he rears back and slaps Holloway.
There is male and female violence. That's right.
Yeah. And she says, "Did you slap your kids also?" And the reaction by everybody to this slap, I thought, was underwhelming.
Totally.
Like, Holloway takes a slap and she's like, reacts to it and looks hard, like it affected her hard. But within a minute or two, everybody's just like, okay, let's move on. Like, nobody, like, Worth doesn't do anything. Like,
no one attacks this man. Nobody like
him.
jumps to action to defend Holloway. It's just like, I know it was almost a suggestive of like she needed to get slapped or something. Like somebody like needed to like do something here. I don't know. It was really, that was a really strange moment because it like didn't really register. And for me, at least for like a few seconds that like, oh, this is a straight up violation, but maybe this is, a lot of this too was like, we have a 2023 perspective. I don't know. 97 might've been.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wild shit going on back then.
Yeah, horror specifically has a lot of violence against women. So unfortunately we do see that a lot. But it was just the reaction to it that kind of threw me
Yeah.
off. But I mean, hopefully he gets his comeuppance in the end. We'll see. So they make it to the end, and what they're gonna do now is they're gonna tie. So I guess they've made it to the last shell. They open it up and they can see there's like a huge, I don't know, 10-foot distance between the wall and the shell. And they're going to tie close together and like swing down to see if there's anything down. Didn't really understand this part. But Holloway decides to go. And right away, I was like, you just had an altercation with Quentin. You should probably chill in the cut for a bit.
Truly a bad choice. Should have been Quentin, but
yeah,
had to be.
They've been kind of going on and off, like whose turn it is, and it happened to be her turn, so she went. And
well, they were going to throw Levin because it was a weight thing. They're like, she's like the lightest, and then Holly's like, I'm second lightest after Levin, because they had to all. If you can imagine, listeners, there's like they're tethering somebody down the side of a wall with a rope, or I guess their clothes tied together, and they would essentially just be holding on somebody's weight, and they wanted to choose the lightest person possible, I guess.
Yeah, and Levin says what to Quentin? She's like, you weigh like 500 pounds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Maybe not, but
yeah. So
solid dude.
So I believe it's Holloway who asks Worth how long he knew, and Worth says that he knew for months that people were being put in the cube. So again, that's kind of like this corporate thing where you kind of close your eyes to it, even though you know what's happening. But it's like now in this day and age as well, like on social media, when you see like things happening with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and like people are closing their eyes to that, and like with Black Lives Matter, and people are kind of closing their eyes to that, like that they're talking about real life shit in this movie, like human instinct to look away when atrocities are being committed. And it's like, I was like, man, you're really saying something.
The real human, the most human moment, and it kind of stands alone in the movie as like a very personal, conversation between these two characters, where you probably are learning the most about both of them, or any of the characters in that moment. But to your point, yeah, I mean, I think from the 1997 perspective, to me, it felt like a real like, Holocaust like reference, where like people were turning their eyes away from like the horrors of what was going on in Nazi Germany or in the concentration camps. Definitely in 2023, there's just like a litany of things we can talk about as to what people are like just not saying anything about, that is part of their job, and life goes on, because like to stop at any point would make, would be more of an effort and potentially life ruining situation. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and they said so much was said with such a small, seemingly insignificant sentence. So much was said, and I really, really like that. So then, now that they've kind of made a connection, he introduces himself as David, and she introduces herself as Helen, and he says, "You're such a Helen, such a Helen."
That's right. They do give their first names. Yeah.
These are the only two characters that we know of their first names. So then they lower her down, and she sees nothing there, but she says she's going to try to swing over to the wall. She swings over, but there's nothing to like grab onto. And then all of a sudden the cube starts to shake. And because it's like this violent shake, everybody kind of loses grip of the clothes. And like Q acts very quickly and jumps to catch the line before it goes out the door. And he kind of almost goes out the door as well, but he catches himself, and then everybody catches it. And then they tell Holloway to climb up, and she climbs up, and she grabs Q's hand, and she's like smiling, and he's smiling, and all of a sudden he stops smiling. I was like, oh fuck. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Do you want to say what happens here?
Well, Worth does the classic, character turn, where he goes from, seemingly just villainous to becoming like the true villain, and uh lets Holloway go, fall to her demise or whatever, and turns around to the rest of the troop here and acts as though he did not intentionally let go, but she slipped through his hands
Yeah.
and died.
Quentin, right? You said Worth, but it was
Sorry, I
Quentin.
meant Quentin.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So then there were four. So
Mhm.
there's this great shot that we see of Levin in the foreground, and everybody else is in the background, and Q's like looking at her, and to me, like she's suspecting that he did it, that he murdered
Mhm.
her,
Mhm.
right? And then like he starts talking to her, and she's like, "Don't even talk to me."
Yeah.
But I really love, because up until now, it's been pretty straightforward, like shots from maybe above or whatever they're doing. But this was one that was kind of stylized, and I really liked how they looked, how that looked.
Yeah. And now that I think about it, that slap prior to this does really set us up for like Levin's reaction later, where it's like, oh, he is capable of being violent towards a woman and like killing her. And so she has that. I think woman to woman knows that like something ain't right here. This crocodile tears or whatever, I
Yeah.
guess, coming from Quentin. That was really masterful, I thought. And yeah, that shot was really great. There were some, we can talk about like the framing and things later, but I do think it was a pretty stylish movie, like some of the way that the shots were made
Okay.
and set. But yeah.
Cool. So at this point, Levin's like, I need to take a break, but they've been going at it for long periods of time. And so Quentin like decides to set a time limit of an hour. It's like, who you are, just shut up, Quentin. But they're like, how are you gonna decide what an hour is? And he's like, an hour is as long as I say. So
God, yeah, that's right.
and so they rest, and this is where there, I think you said it earlier, we start to see like they're all tired, so it looks a bit psychedelic, like the screens kind of going everywhere. And I
Mhm.
think I may be wrong, but I believe this is the first time that we hear music is in this section, which I thought was pretty cool.
I was going to bring that up, that we hear it in the voiceover part in the beginning when like
Okay.
they're kind of or montaging through a series of rooms, and then yeah, this thing, but the sound is very minimal. It's like a weird like
Yeah.
every now and again, but there is very little music. And
Yeah.
this is one of the scenes, yeah. I think like is this like does Quentin have a dream during this time? Or like is
Um,
he
I don't recall. If it is, I might have put it on in the notes
I
later
don't
on,
know.
but
Maybe I misinterpreted, but like doesn't he reveal that he dropped Holloway at this point? Or
no,
like
no,
okay.
happens later on.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but at this point, so they're all sleeping, and then Quentin picks up Levin and takes the boots as well, and leaves and takes her into another room. And then this is where he says that Kazan and Worth are traps. He's like, Quentin, you and I are the cube. The cube is us. And I'm like, this man has lost it. He has lost it completely. And then he starts to say, we're a man and a woman, the perfect key. Like I insert into you or something like that. And it's time to go down. And it's like, yo, dude, what are you talking about? Uh,
Yeah.
eh,
Extremely alpha shit right here. Like
yeah. Uh,
this man thinks about Rome a lot. Let's just say that. This type dude.
yeah. So then the, Worth jumps in here and kind of like uh, separates them. And
Yeah.
Quentin says that Worth and uses a derogatory term for neurodivergent people, which is,
He
but he
uses the
says,
R word.
yeah, he uses the R word, and he says that they're spies. He says, and Holloway was as well, because she had outside information on his family, on his marriage. That so you realize that what she said, what Holloway was saying to him was true about him having anger issues and of him beating his wife and beating his kids. And he's like, there's no way she could know that. She has to be a spy. It's like, no, dude,
Yeah.
it's written on your face. You're a
You
cop, you have anger
told
issues.
us everything about you. I know, it's like it's so beautiful because it's like a true like expression of how people act on social media where they just get like so upset when it's like, man, you've been out here tweeting wild shit, posting wild shit, and then you get mad when people like call you racist or call you like whatever, and you've been acting this way. I mean, maybe you didn't come out and identify, yes, I am racist, yes, I beat my kids, but it's like
Yeah.
shit you're posting. We can all see it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a advocate of like believing when people tell you who they are. And
Absolutely.
this man told you who he was.
He told
Right.
you. He told
Yeah.
you.
So Levin here, this is where she's like, she realizes that you dropped her. You dropped Holloway. And
Right.
so she's like, give us the boot, you pig. Love it.
Mhm.
And he says, you don't want the boot, and he beats Worth with it. Like, and again, Levin doesn't try to stop. Like, everybody's on their own when it comes to Quentin. Quentin's just beating everybody up in this freaking movie.
She screamed a little, but yeah, nobody's intervening. It's true.
Yeah.
And he does beat up Worth a lot. And Worth is like taking it too.
Yeah,
Worth is not fighting back.
he does not fight. I think he fights back at the very end. But
Right,
yeah.
right.
But this is kind of comical. Like, he's at this point, he's just Quentin is just using Worth as like a prop. He throws him in
Yeah.
the room, very much
Yeah.
like Uncle Phil's him. You know, when Uncle Phil grabbed the Fresh Prince of Bel Air. You just like
Oh, right,
yeah,
right.
it very much just throws him in the other rooms to see.
Yeah.
And that at this point, we hear that Worth is laughing maniacally. And I was like, oh shit, what's happening? Did you have any idea before we see what's happening? Did you have any idea why he would be laughing maniacally like he was?
No.
Okay.
And I still don't know.
Oh,
Explain.
yeah. So they get into the room and they see Ren's body.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so they
Yes.
realize that they're in the first room that they were in, or one of the first rooms. They're basically
They're back where they
back at the
started.
beginning, right?
Yeah.
Ren's body is right there. And Worth says, it's Ren, the wrestler. He's like, we've been
Yeah.
going in circles.
Right.
But so Q demands that Levin figure it out. And like Levin's just calling him out now. He's like, you're a fucking murderer. Get the fuck out of here. And he says, there's no way out of here. And Quentin starts crying. He breaks down. Yeah, I don't know if he realizes that all the machismo, all the alpha energy that he was doing, it was for nothing. Like, it wasn't helping. In fact, you were hurting. You hurt people. You killed people.
Man, I don't know if I can. I don't trust him enough to think that he was that aware.
Self-aware.
I still feel like he was like that was his final like uh um what's the word, like his last shot to get these people on his side to like help it. He know because he does know that without them he is screwed. Like, and he's been trying to force them to work for him this whole time.
Yeah.
And they're ready to leave his ass. And he's like, if I can look somewhat sympathetic right now, this is my reading. Then maybe yeah.
Well, you're right, because he did the crocodile tears earlier.
Yes.
When he Holloway fell or whatever.
Right.
And so he's being manipulative.
I think he's manipulating them.
Okay.
Yes.
But what I liked here is that Kazan comforts him, which was
very touching.
Volumes to the Kazan's character as opposed to Quentin's character.
Mm-hmm.
So then they're like, well, wasn't Ren killed in that room? I think it's Worth figuring it out, or Levin. I forget who's figuring it out, but they're saying, wasn't Ren killed in that room? And then they brought him over to this room. There's like, well, yeah, what does that matter? It's like, well, we weren't on the edge before, so there's no room there now. And there was a room there before when Ren was there. So something's happening. And so they say that we haven't been moving in circles. The rooms have. They've been shifting.
Mm-hmm.
Which, and they talked about, like, in the notes for the movie, that there was noise coming through. Like, for example, when they dropped or when Holloway fell the first time and then Quentin caught her, that shaking was the rooms moving, right? But to
Mhm.
me, that was the first indication of any noise. Did you hear noise any other time, any other time throughout the movie that would indicate like something happening outside of the cube?
I did not, even on the second viewing, did not pick up on it. But that's not to say that now, if I was to watch it and listen for it, that there isn't some grinding, metal grinding noise happening that I thought was just ambient, like movie noise or
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah, but see, that's like kind of goes back to like it's when it's very convenient to bring this stuff up, they'll, you know,
yeah.
like pull it out. And like maybe, it's like a first movie, maybe like they could have made it more pronounced at a certain point earlier, but whatever.
So I found out that the reason the inclusion for like the noise, ambient noise outside of and the shaking
Okay.
was because the studio that they were filming in was literally next to an elevated train
Oh
that would
yeah.
make noise,
I did read that.
and
Yeah.
so they had to
Incorporate
figure out
that
how to
into,
incorporate a way, which I thought
yeah,
was cool. That's
that
cool.
is
It's
very good. That is
low
very good.
budget filmmaking, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, they say the numbers are markers, points on a map. And they ask, how do you map a point that keeps moving? They call them permutations. A permutation is a list of all the coordinates that the room passes through. They say, I know, and then she says, I know where the exit is. The room that was outside of the cube, um, the room that was outside of the cube with all the numbers was a bridge. So they go back to that room and wait until it becomes a bridge again. That's their plan. She says it's like a big combination lock. It could take days to get there. So to figure it out right.
The Cartesian coordinates, of course, she says. Of course.
Of course.
Cartesian coordinates.
Yeah. I was like, sure. Yeah, sure. I don't even know if that's a real thing or not.
No, it is. It
Yeah.
is.
But yeah, so at this point, I'm like, Levin is doing her math thing, and it's fine. But this is where I put down that she's doing math with a button scratching into metal. So like we were
Okay,
on the same.
maybe this is the first time we see it, but
It's
I was
still like, what the hell are
thinking
you gonna
that
do?
she was doing all the rest of it in her head. So now now it's finally gotten so insane that she has to write it down with a button. But
Yeah.
before she was able to like compute it in her head, which is even crazier. But yes.
So she's having some problems solving the equations or the problems. She says traps identified by the numbers that are the power of prime, which are huge numbers, and she can't figure it out on her own. She'd need a computer. And Quentin says, I'm not dying in a rat maze. And she says these are astronomical numbers, two factors of 567. And this is when we find out that Kazan is a mathematical
Human
savant,
computer.
a human computer, yeah. And he could do all the computations in his head immediately, like almost immediately. So he's a
Mm-hmm.
genius.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about this inclusion of that? Like, I don't know. It feels
It's
so.
tropey. It's
Yeah,
tropey. It's
yeah,
tropey, and it's a little like uh what's the word? Yeah, I mean it's just it is tropey. I mean, I get the thrust of it. I don't know if it's offensive. It's a little like stereotypical, I guess.
yeah. Like
And like
lazy.
it's kind of lazy, yeah.
Yeah. And you did like remind me of like Rain Man
It's
from
Rain. It's totally Rain Man.
yeah. So again, Quentin uses Worth as a guinea pig and throws him in the room to test whether or not it's a good room or not. It is. Quentin starts bossing people around again, and then he comes in last. So everybody goes in, then he comes in last, and Worth takes that opportunity to smash the door in on his neck, choking him and like preventing him from going into the room. At this point, he tells Levin and Kazan to hurry up. And so basically, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get away from Q room by room, and he catches up to them, but there's only three of them, and he asks, "Where's Worth?" And all of a sudden, Worth was below him and opened up the door, and Quentin falls right down into the floor below them, and that's the end of Quentin. Or is it? We don't know. We don't know yet, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
we're made to think that he is bye-bye and they're gonna, you know, book it to the bridge room
Yeah.
from here. Mhm.
So then, so now it's just Worth, Kazan, and Levin, and so they make it back to the middle, which is the bridge, but somehow, oh, they lose Kazan because they don't get out in time, and the room moves, and so Worth has to go back and find him, which I really like that they didn't just leave him, that they went back to get him, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so while Worth goes to get him, Levin steps on a piece of glass, and lo and behold, it's from her glasses. This is the room that takes them to the bridge, and this is the room that they started off with in the beginning of the movie. And so, like we said earlier, if they had stayed in this room, eventually they would have gotten there. So it's kind of a head fuck on that one.
So it's just like we shouldn't always be doing, there's like this, you know, bumper sticker slogan, you're being a human being instead of, you should be a human being, not a human doing. You should just sit and wait for your time to come and not try to constantly be working towards something that is going to dig you deeper into a trap.
And that's exactly who Quentin was. He's a man, or quote unquote, a man of action, right?
A man of action.
The only thing he could think of to fix the situation is to do something instead of sitting back, assessing the situation, assessing everybody's strengths and weaknesses, that sort of thing. It's just like, no, we must continuously move forward. And you said something about capitalism. That's like with capitalism, you're always looking for like that corporation or whatever to grow, exponential growth, infinite growth, which is unsustainable, right? And I think that's kind of what they're saying a bit here in this movie. I love the fact that they say so much with so little, and I don't think a lot of people give it the credit that it deserves. I mean, yes, the dialogue is a bit messy and also a bit sloppy, but when it does say things, the things that it does say are really interesting.
Yeah, it's really profound without having all the extra bells and whistles and like layers of, you know, narrative on top of it. It is just like straight survival, and in like people are in a crucible of like their own devices and trying to figure out how to survive. And yeah, like today we're all just constantly being prompted and nudged to like to tap, to swipe, to move, to do something, to like, you know, distract ourselves and to feel better or to solve a problem. All the solutionism and everything that's floating around just serves this headless system that imprisons us all.
Yeah. This movie
It's deep, man. It's deep.
So so he finds Kazan, brings him back, and they get him back in time, and the room moves, and then Levin opens the door, the final door, and it's an empty space, and they're like, just give it a minute, be patient, like you just said, let's be patient for a second. So then suddenly the room starts rumbling, they open the door, and it's the bridge, and it's red, but it's clear, it's not prime, right? So Kazan opens the door, and they see daylight, and he sits down, and I'm like, why are you sitting down, hurry up? And that's Levin's the same way. She's like, what are you doing? You can't quit now, you know, it's not your fault. And he's like, I have nothing to live for out there except, what does he say, something like, except like boundless human stupidity,
Something like that. Yeah.
And she says, like, I can live with that. So all of a sudden, here comes Q, and he jumps from behind Levin and stabs her with the door handle and murders her, and she's dead. That was
Impales
surprising.
her pretty good. Yeah.
Pretty
I didn't
good.
expect her to be the first one out of the in fact, I don't think I was expecting Quentin to come back. Though I should, like, knowing what I know now about like kind of the horror tropes and genres, like, yeah, okay, that needed to happen. But her being the first one picked off in that group did surprise me.
Was surprising. Well, and also I was like, well, Holloway kind of had a similar death where we don't see her die, and we don't see Quentin die. So I was like, okay, we haven't seen Holloway come back, so maybe we're not going to see
Right.
Quentin come back. So I think it was a bit of a red herring there. So it was a
Hmm.
bit
Hmm.
more surprising when Quentin does come back, kills Kazan, then goes and stabs Worth as well.
Hmm.
And he ends up uh, with the blood on his hands. He points him at Kazan and like scares him. He says like red, right? And
Yeah.
then Kazan moves and opens the door, and Q enters the room or starts to enter it, but Worth from behind grabs his leg or his body, and he can't move. And Kazan is holding him from the other side, and so the room starts to move and ends up kind of like slicing him in half or cutting him off and killing him. And
He
we
gets
even
smeared.
see the blood smear on the wall, which I thought was really, really good, really cool.
It also like zooms in on his eyes really close in this shot. I feel like that really looks like the original Shining poster. If you know what I'm talking about, the yellow. It's like the eyes
Oh, yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
the T. Saul Bastard, that
Okay.
one. But
Well,
it has that like really freaked out, like I don't know, wide-eyed like stare. It's crazy.
I wonder if they're drawing like a connection because the first image we saw in the beginning of the movie was the eyes as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, it definitely is a kind of the mirror for sure.
yeah.
I thought.
So the room kind of moves in this like cavernous darkness, and then Worth lays down and dies next to Levin. And so
Mhm.
Kazan is the remaining survivor, and he's in this white hallway, and he walks towards the light as he kind of disappears into it, and it kind of engulfs him. And that's the end. That's the end of Cube from 1998. So we're going to rate it in a second here, but generally overall, I wanted to get your sense of the movie. What did you think about it? What did you like about it?
I mean, I really liked where it was going and what it was saying and what it was doing for having such a low budget. I mean, I'm a real sucker for it. So, overall, it was definitely enjoyable. It was even enjoyable the second time too that I watched it, and I would, it's a fun flick. It really is like got a lot going on. I take issue with the ending. I don't like endings with a bright white light and people walking towards
Specific.
it. I
Oh, okay.
just watched another one last night where they did the same thing, and it's just like, man, I don't know. It's such a you got to wrap it up somehow. I get it, but also, I mean, I was reading a lot into that ending and like the character that ends up surviving, um, versus like the female character who also can do math really good, but like, I don't know. I feel like we live in the world where there's like a bunch of Kazans now, honestly, and
Mm,
I don't know. Not that it's a bad thing, but like that we definitely live in a world that is like Kazan can thrive. So I don't
yeah.
know. It's kind of a bummer to me.
Did you have? Are you equating or connecting the color white to anything like white light, like going to heaven sort of thing, or are you just saying like if it was black, you also wouldn't like you don't like movies that just fade to black? Is there
Yeah.
something with okay? So it's just the fading into nothingness that you're talking
Yeah.
about. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Yeah, like
Yeah.
yeah. Well, the one thing that and this isn't talking about the character that survives because I also would have liked what's her name? Not Holloway, Levin. I think
Mm-hmm.
Levin should have, so she did the
Mm-hmm.
majority of the work, like
Mm-hmm.
90% of the work to get them
Mm-hmm.
there. And Kazan
Mm-hmm.
helped, especially towards the end, he was like crucial, but it was really like the
Yeah.
last 10%, right? She did the vast
Right.
majority of the work and she doesn't. But as far as like the ending is walking into light or not, like I like the fact that the story is contained to the cube.
I do
That,
too.
that's one thing I liked
Mm-hmm.
about that. So that's something I was
Mm-hmm.
appreciative of that we don't see. And this reminds me of a movie called The Platform. Have you seen The Platform?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
What's going on?
awesome. It's very anti-capitalist. It's basically these people, and this is like from the trailer. And you know what? Let me hold it for just 1 second because I actually do recommendations. So I'll do that. That'll be my
Okay.
recommendation, and then I'll ask you for a recommendation of a movie in a similar tone if you have one. But what we do now is we rate the movie out of 5 upside down crosses.
Okay.
So what would you give Cube from 1998? How many upside down crosses?
Okay. Do we do halves?
You
Half
have,
cross?
so you could do
Do
quarters.
really? Oh shit.
You don't have to,
I
it's a,
mean, I want to give it a 4. It's not a 5. It's not, it's like, it's a, it's like a, it's maybe a 3.5,
okay.
4. Man, I'll give it a 4. Fuck it.
Get a
You know,
4.
let's give it a 4. Why not?
Four.
There's
It's
a
all
lot to
good.
talk about here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gave it a 4 as well. I thought, it had some tropes that I really didn't like too much, and
Hmm.
the dialogue was a bit um lacking, and some of the
Hmm.
storyline was a bit lacking. But overall, for being from 1998, I thought it was pretty good.
Hmm.
The like we talked about earlier, the special effects looked great. The cube like looks great. Like if you're gonna spend money on the cube, like because
Yeah.
that's the star of your
Oh
show.
yeah.
And they
Yeah.
did that. And they changed the lights to me. They did a really good job with what they had.
Yeah.
So there's movies that I've seen that had 2-3 times the budget and had less of a story than this.
Absolutely. I mean,
So yeah.
this man was working. He thought about it a lot. And you could see that. And that's what I think I appreciate the most about it was like something like all the math that was involved in the script would have derailed you know, any writer, any lesser writer. But he pursued and made it sound, as you said, and
Yeah.
like that's fascinating. And then went on to I don't know. I feel like this is a movie where like the director should have been one of the actors. It has that vibe where like he
Yeah.
wrote, directed, and or something like that. But anyway,
Yeah.
but he doesn't. He keeps himself behind the camera, which I appreciate, which is cool. He was concerned with some really deep, weighty concepts, and I'm always gonna gravitate towards that in a
Yeah.
movie.
Same. So I think I gave it 4 upside down crosses. I think you did as well. So
Mm-hmm.
then what we do now is I just ask you for a recommendation of a movie similar. It could be a low budget movie. It could be a one setting movie. It could be a technological horror like you were talking about earlier. Or even if it could be like a book in the same kind of vein and all that sort of stuff. But what I'll do, I'll give you some time to think about that. And I'll tell you, for me, my recommendation for you would be The Platform. And this was I believe it was like a Netflix original, or at least, it premiered on Netflix a couple years ago. And it's a Spanish movie. And basically what it is these people are on this platform, um, and it's like, I don't know, we don't know how many feet high it is, but let's just say it's like 300 levels high. And
Mm-hmm.
every day food starts, they drop food down from the very top, so it goes from level to level. The top people get a buffet of food, everything like pork and ham and steaks and sausage and cakes and all this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And as the platform goes lower, less and more people eat, and less of it trickles down to the bottom level. And they
Mm-hmm.
don't know how far down it goes, and they don't know how far up it
Mm-hmm.
is. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just amazing. It's a really
Mm-hmm.
really good movie. And it's
Okay.
obviously they're talking about capitalism and all that sort of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So trickle
Mm-hmm.
down
Mm-hmm.
economics and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
So The Platform, that would be my
Okay.
recommendation.
Okay. Very cool. I was really racking my brain to think of a movie that like I would recommend that you haven't seen, but I know you've seen both of these. So, well,
That's
maybe
fine.
one
That's
you
fine.
haven't, but I mean, it did make me think of The Game, David Fincher's The Game a lot. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
The Game. Is it like
It's more
The Most
psychological
Dangerous Game?
thriller. No, it's like Michael Douglas is this really rich guy in San Francisco, and he's kind of set up in this really horrific game, they call it, where he is kind of like playing for his life. I guess maybe Dangerous Game style, but like he's a really selfish person, and essentially his family is trying to teach him a lesson. I think to be more like selfless and giving, and
Uh,
not so self-obsessed and everything. And so he gets this gift certificate to play a game, and goes through, tries to go and apply to play this game. It's really obscure as to what the game entails. And then they're like, well, you actually don't qualify. And he's like, well, fuck you. But then all these like crazy things start happening to him. Like his bank account gets drained and like he gets like
Oh,
almost murdered and he's getting like chased. And then he like ends up getting into the situation where he has to like kill a person. And then he like tries to commit suicide. And so he's like getting just like pushed to the edge in all these like crazy ways. And I don't want to spoil the ending or
yes.
anything like this, but like it's very wild and existential. I liked
Okay,
it a
I
lot.
saw it a very long time ago, but
Mhm.
it's just like Cube, where like I haven't seen it for so long. It's essentially a new movie to me,
A new movie, yeah.
and I had forgotten about it. So I definitely want to watch that again.
No, it's a real fun, and it's a Fincher movie, so you know it's pretty stylish.
Yeah,
But you know, the other movie that's actually made me think about, in a kind of a different way, but just the sense of like being trapped and being watched and like not knowing the right move to get out is Blair Witch. And that's also like a very stripped down, you know, first movie, low budget, extremely scary movie to me to this day.
yeah,
Like
it's still scary. Yeah,
it's still freaky as hell. But in like a very different sense, I think a lot of this stuff could be applied to that movie as well.
yeah,
I
I
don't know.
agree. I think those are two great recommendations, and
Yeah,
specifically like Blair Witch Project. It's got like that isolation horror. These guys,
totally.
they're isolated by themselves.
Hmm.
In Blair Witch Project, they're isolated by themselves, but in the world, like, so it's like
And
two.
they also like go in circles in Blair Witch. Like they
Yeah,
keep getting back to that part. That was the part of Blair Witch that scared me the most. Was like if you've ever been lost, like camping or something, and just the frustration, but then like finding yourself back to where you were like trying to get away from. Very
yeah.
scary. Very
So
good.
I'm Mexican. We don't camp.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
No, I should do that. But yeah, so that was a great recommendation. So Sarah and I are going to continue our conversation in the Sunday school sessions. But first, I wanted to give you, Sarah, a chance to just say how people can follow you and how they can support your work and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So what I said in the beginning about the Campo de Estrellas, you can follow that page or my Instagram. I mean, I'm not too active on social right now, but I'm at Sarah, SAH_RAW. Hit me up on there. And mostly it's the cemetery stuff. So check it out.
Okay. And I'll link everything in the show notes and all that. But I do want to thank you so much for being on this. This was a lot of fun. I
Yeah, it was
really
fun.
appreciate you choosing Cube. I didn't think anybody was going to choose it. It's like,
Oh yeah.
it's so like that a lot of people haven't heard about it. So it was really
Yeah.
a fun time to talk about it. So thank you so much.
No
And
problem.
everybody, thank you. And we will talk to you next week.
Live spooky, die spooky.